On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome, everybody, inside the Brady Broadcasting Studios at 25 North Glen. This is The Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks so much for being part of the program today. Don't turn your back on love, as the old country boy would say. Except now the country boy is made to look like a cowboy, a manufactured boy, who, as Russell Smith told me, ain't no cowboy. The point here is authenticity. When you go on stage, do you connect with the spirit inside of you? What are you talking about? Is it made-up candy corn, or is it the real thing? The magic still exists because of musicians like my guest. He brings an effortless joy to the bandstand, singing gospel bluegrass, wearing a Dodger jersey with Stephen Stills, or an opera of phantoms with Taj Mahal, or with David Crosby, or Roger Jelly Roll Troy. Don't be blinded by the light because my guest has a lot to say. Can jazz music and inherent street music be played in suburbia at a mall? Or is there a harvesting of new oddball locations like Tucson, which inherently attract a lot of quirky people? But make no mistake, the days of playing Boston and Cape Cod for a month is over. A week's engagement at the both end with the Brotherhood is long gone in this country. Playing over at Second City with Alan Arkin and Rich Fidoli? Heck, give me a little Bill Doggett. How about a little Pine Top Perkins with a little Richard Manuel on the side? Inevitably, your soulfulness is what gets you through the good times and bad. When you're down, you're up, and when you're up, you're down. And when you're playing live, cut it loose and see if that real country boy comes out. You might be surprised. Mike Finnigan, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thanks, Jake. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hell, just listening to your intros is spellbinding.
Well, and you were the...
I love it. I'm going, I wonder who he's talking about.
Talking about, yeah, well, I mean, you know, you were talking about playing with house money, and, you know, I really would love you to talk about, you know, when I watch you on, I've actually never been able to come see you play live, which is, I need to do that. But when I see you play, I do feel like the spirit is inside of you, is connected, and there's nothing else going on around you except that. And if you could articulate that, the ability of co-joining spirituality in your own way with your soul and your music, I don't think there's anyone else I could ask that question to than you.
Well, you know, I think most musicians that, I think I mentioned before the last time we talked that, you know, the way I feel about it is that you don't choose music, it chooses you. And, you know, Duke Ellington said something on music is my mistress and no one comes before her. You know, and that's a kind of mindset and an understanding that musicians have about what they're doing. They're called, you know, it's a calling, you know, like kind of like maybe a preacher would say that, except I think it's a little different because we don't have as good a product.
No, but when you're singing, I mean,
we're certainly not one that's as seductive. But you know, there's you know, I was talking to somebody the other day about how he's a young guy and he wants to be a musician. He's quite a bit. I mean, he's in his early 20s, and I said, do you know what it feels? You know what I'm talking about when I tell you when it's coming through you, and you're not doing it? And he said, yeah, I think I do. And I said, okay, well then you're crazy enough to maybe do that.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. It's coming through you, Mike. When I see that, it just flows through you, and that to me is like that's not that's not of this world. I mean, there's something else. I mean, I just think that that's the best. And then here's the other question: is that why are you able to look back with honesty and clarity and know how hard it was? You have perspective, and I guess it comes with security. Why do we have this problem in our society now where there's no ability to look back and remember where you were before and how you got to where you were? I mean, everything that you talk about is heck, we didn't know. It's about perspective. Where has that perspective gone? Is it just that we're just we just went from being an extremely rich country with a very thriving middle class to now I just read an article in the Times, New York Times, that we are middle class here no longer number one in the world. Where's the
Yeah, I saw
perspective
that
gone? You
piece
know,
too.
where's it gone? I don't break it down for me.
Well, a part of what you're talking about is very interesting to me, because I was recently talking with someone else about the betrayal of our national memory, and how destructive that is and how dangerous it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're living in a time now when there's a lot of people in politics and in big business whose work it is, it seems to me, to revise history. And I don't mean not just stuff that happened like in the middle of the last century, but stuff that happened last week.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right. Clive
and
Bundy,
we've got
Clive
the
and
short
Bundy.
attention span audience, of Americans who are so busy either working their asses off in order to make ends meet that they haven't got time to pay attention, or are just plain ignorant and don't care.
It's to me, it's this, and it's this obsession. I mean, I know that guys you played with like Jimi Hendrix, Etta James. I mean, what am I trying to say here? I know that that it was an in your face, that people were in their faces, and they had to deal with all sorts of distractions, and they got worn down because of it, and and that all that stuff is there. But it's like this idea in our society now. I think, Mike, the way I look at it is, and again, I'm only 36, but I can just see it. I was in teaching for a long time, and I say, okay, so you're getting a huge amount of compensation at the highest end, basically saying this is what we consider in our society to be successful, is if you make gazillions of dollars. And then on the flip side, everything else is not worth anything. There's no balance. There's no balance, and I don't want to call it redistribution. I'm just calling it about sanity. If any normal person could look at it and say, what is the imperative here? If I'm going to work a job as a teacher, I want to teach. I love working with kids. But at least I want to know that after 30 years, I can retire with a decent retirement. No one's looking to get rich. But if you don't get a raise for 8 or 10 years, you've hit that ceiling. And what's the motivation after that? I'm not saying it's all about money, but I'm just it's called simple
Well,
fairness.
certainly ought to be about respect at the least.
Yeah, at the least. And just that's what I'm saying. Like, you seem to know with your son, you're trying to be a role model for younger musicians. What are you saying to them these days? And what are the new things? How inventive does your son? How entrepreneurial does your son have to be in order to get gigs and keep his name out there?
Well, he's very entrepreneurial. I'm so impressed with, I mean, he's doing things that he didn't learn from me. And in fact, he didn't, he whatever he's learned from me, he learned mostly by watching, I think, because we haven't had too many sit down. My wife just walked by and said he learned everything from me. Which is pretty true.
Right.
Everything that matters, women are a lot more useful and smarter than men.
My wife reminds me of that every day. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, but he, we haven't had too many sit-down, musical instruction moments. But in terms of his, the way that he goes about, building his career in music is entirely different from what I was doing. But in some ways it's similar, but a lot of it's very, very different. But he's very he works hard, and he's a smart kid because he is entrepreneurial. He's not talking to an agent in Chicago, that's going to get him a gig in some upholstered sewer in Buffalo for a month or something. Like, that's what I used to do.
I know.
mean, because there aren't any gigs in upholstered sewers. Since I think there's 4, but
You're right. 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 Right.
like he's producing and doing all kinds of stuff, and he's making his own CDs, and his band, some of their music just got picked up pretty early. I shouldn't say just, but their music is being used by the San Francisco Giants for their television advertisements, and he's working on another CD for his band, the Monophonics, and he's been in Europe with this guy Ben Lunkel Soul, who's quite a big artist, I guess, in France and Belgium. They're on Motown France, and my son and the band they co-produced his latest album, which is about to be released. And so he's got his hands in a lot of pots, and doing a lot of things that I wasn't yet involved in when I was his age, because those possibilities weren't there. They
Right.
came later.
And my God, we Mike Finnigan from Southern California today. You can hear the jets flying overhead. Mike,
I'm sorry about
no,
that.
no,
I told
we
them
we
to
go.
not do that today.
It's okay. Listen, I don't. That's an impossibility with the amount of flights that come in there. But I wanted to. The goal of my show, in a lot of ways, is to paint the broad picture of my artists and their dexterity. So I want to play a short clip of music here, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
I was playing this album over and over again the other day. I was taking care of both my kids. My wife went out, and I was like, "Who is playing harp?" And it's you, harmonica.
Oh yeah, I messed around with the harp for a while, and you know what? I never got very good at it. And what I realized was like, I drove my wife crazy for a couple of years. And what I finally figured out was the only way you can get good on the harp is to just play nothing but the harp. And because it takes about 10 years to get a good tone.
And you just got to keep playing.
And so about 3 or 4 years into my harp playing, well, it was something I did a little bit, but I was playing keyboards and singing, and I started fooling around with that. And like I said, you listen to people like Kim Wilson, who's a more a modern kind of harp player, but his sound, and the older guys like James Cotton and Little Walter and Sonny Boy Williamson and the guys like that, you go, geez, what a sound, and the sound is just like years of playing it, to develop the kind of, really muscular sound that they have, and I was a long way from that.
Well, I just like I like to let people know how like you might not consider that, but it was like that tune was called Death Letter Blues, and the last time Mike and I did this amazing first interview, which is really out of all 400 whatever the interviews I've done, like one of my favorites. And right after that interview, I'm in a local bookstore here, and I'm digging through, and sure enough, there's Crazed Hipsters, and I never thought I'd find it. And there you are in those overalls, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And that album just smokes. And
That's a very good album. That thing really stands up. In my humble opinion, there's, it's 42 years old, but if the music really stands up. It sounds really good still. It's relevant and funky.
Well, let's actually play an extended piece off that, and then we'll come back and break it down.
No, don't. My, my, my. Don't get strange out, baby. Sometimes, my. It's starting to rain now, baby, now. You got your power lines down, and the man's in the street. You know you can't drive around without bringing down some kind of heat. But somebody lost it, and they blew up and fought all my neighbors. I know they think it's my fault, but I can't be bothered with what folks say. You know that I'll be rolling up in the hay. Yes, I will. I got a thing for you, baby. I said I sure got a thing for you, baby. Right now I'm sitting on a stash of corn in the barn. My hard work is done. You know you go out and it feels so good just to lay in the sun. Don't waste your time. Get up and join the dance. This time will waste you if you give it half a chance. Change is the last rule. Love is the first sign that I got something can quench your thirst.
What do you got to quench my thirst? And you're gonna roll. And you're gonna roll. Are you gonna roll up in the hate? What a is that the line? Is that right?
Yeah,
Oh my, Mike, this stuff. How? Where did that song come from? Can you break that down?
that was written by Elaine Tejan.
It was
And
Tejan.
he's an old friend of mine. He was in the Surfs, one of the last guitar player in the Surfs. There was a couple of them, and he is a talented songwriter still. He lives in Northern California, and we've been in touch. He just sent me a bunch of songs that we're going to call through and see if we can find something for the Phantom Blues Band. But he's a really great songwriter and singer and player.
You know the guy I wanted to ask you about. At that point, I believe Roger Jelly Roll Troy produced that album, or he played on that album.
He and Al Schmidt.
Can you talk about Jelly Roll, because he continues to pop up on the radar, and some of his playing is great, but I just wanted to know your musical relationship with him.
Well, let's see. Well, he was from Cincinnati.
Exactly.
And that's just a little bit south of where I grew up, and we didn't know each other back when I was living in Ohio as a kid. When I was I grew up there until I was 18, and then moved away to go to college. And I never really lived in Troy or with my parents or around there after that. But Cincinnati was a great musical hotbed. A lot of good stuff going on there. That's where King Records was, and it just had a really rich American music culture there with country music and rock and roll and rhythm and blues, and right there on the Ohio River, like Kentucky's, you can just look across the river and there it is, and a lot of, it just had a really great musical heritage. And Jelly Roll grew up around there playing with a lot of great people, including Lonnie Mack, among others. And then he moved to San Francisco, and that's when I met him. And we had a lot of friends in common, and we just kind of connected, and he got involved. What's interesting about that album is we were on Blue Thumb Records, and I had proposed. I met Lowell George around that time, and Lowell was just kind of getting started himself. In Southern California, and we really clicked. And my manager at the time was Marshall Burrell, who's Milton Berle's nephew. He was something else. What a character! He had been an agent at William Morris, and he suggested that Lowell and me and Jerry Wood and the band get together and see if there was some chemistry. So we proposed Lowell George producing our album to the head of Blue Thumb, and he said, "Lowell George, are you kidding? He doesn't have any track record." And which was true, but I never let him forget that. Years later, I'd see him and go, "Hey, Lowell George doesn't have any track record."
Was that Krasnow?
And,
Krasnow said that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Which, I mean, at the time, he didn't have any track record, but I said, "So what? He's but then it worked out that Al Schmidt, who was really, I mean, he's won about 25 Grammys by now. He's how many Grammys? He has more. He's won more Grammys than anybody as an engineer.
Yeah, he's the one that coaxed you in to go see James Moody playing with that French singer. That was you told me.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Well, Al is, but he was the engineer on that album, and Jelly Roll we managed to slide him in as a co-producer with Al, and which was ironic because we said, who's got less track record than old George? Maybe Roger Jelly Roll Troy, maybe. But it all worked out. It was great. It was a real good, it all clicked and worked, and it was really, it couldn't have been better.
What is it, can you talk, you just said something, you said, so what? You said he doesn't have a track record. I would like you to talk about where did you come, have you always had that personality of saying, actually, these guys have really great talent, so what they don't have a pedigree or a track record, give them a chance. When did that humbleness come into saying, look how, like you said, you're playing with house money, but was that from the days of Tigran and the Surfs? Because these are the values when did that click for you?
Well, I think it was just kind of how I was raised, I imagine. My parents were, my parents were Depression-era Irish people. And, humility, there's two things you'll learn, humility and humor. Those words are connected,
Mm-hmm.
And, there's there's an earthiness in that kind of background, I think, that is just part of who those people were in the extended family. There was a lot of humor, and also a good deal of humility, which wasn't hard. It's like, as my father, said, humility should come easy to you, But, those kinds of things that were like serious but not, where they're kidding you on the square and, on one hand telling you how great you are if you actually do something great, and the next minute saying, hey, don't get too smug, you got nothing coming.
Right. Right. No, I mean, to me, it's like, because even though Lowell didn't wind up producing it, you got to just get to a point where you're like, I'm secure enough. I know what is good. I know who is talented, and I'm going to run with that. It's just more humane, and it just seems like those cats. The more I look at your discography and your history, whether you walked into it serendipitously or whether it just happened, you just kind of gravitate to you. I mean, that's just what happens. You just wind up with people that are of like mind, and then you can make music with them. And I just think that, and make live music with them, like you do with Bonnie Raitt or the Phantom Blues Band. I mean, you're more active today than maybe you were back as a crazed hipster.
Well, not quite. I was, I am active still, though. I'm really active. We were working a lot in those days in the 60s and 70s. I was working like mad, working weeks every night for weeks at a time. Not so much of that now, but certainly a lot wider net. Working in the last 2 years with Bonnie, I was in Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and all over Europe and all over the United States and Canada. So that we didn't do that, but we were all over, Arkansas.
Yeah,
No,
right. No, but that
just all over the U.S. and little clubs and stuff, and playing some concerts and, festivals and so on. But I've always worked a lot live, and I really like that. That's the real deal, of course.
I wanted you to spend a minute, as I continue on and I start to take all this content that I have and start to mix it into a more sophisticated show. Leadership is continually coming to the forefront, and insofar as I'll give you an example, like when I interviewed Bernard Purdy, he's talking about when they did Aretha's album Rock Steady, and that particular track. The track they took of that during the middle of the song, all the sheet music fell off the piano, and instead of bugging out or panicking or saying, "Oh, we got to start over," she just kicked it up a notch, and the rest of the band followed suit. Everybody stayed calm in the pocket, and that was the track they kept. So it was just staying cool under fire. And I wanted you to talk about similar a leadership style that you admire. I know you admired her for many reasons, but Etta James specifically. Talk about some of the leadership qualities that she had and why you just looked up to her so much, aside from just, the fact that you were listening to her records as a kid.
Oh, Etta was, she was, there's an album she did called Matriarch of the Blues, and that's a good description of her in her later life. She was a great person to play with and work for because she had confidence in her own judgment with regard to music and musicians. And once she had people on the bandstand with her, she had the confidence that they were going to do the right thing. And I rarely saw, when we would rehearse, or she might make some suggestions about tempo or, other things. But other than that, because she didn't play an instrument, but she certainly knew what she liked. And other than, some basic suggestions about, time or maybe change the key or, that seems a little high. But she didn't tell guys what to do,
Mm-hmm.
Which a lot of people will. Some people that I've worked for people that micromanage, in the studio or live. I've had, worked with people that try to micromanage everything, and it's a little bit distracting, because then you find yourself thinking about everything except what you're doing.
Exactly.
And
and it's like,
but Etta didn't
yeah.
do that. She was just like she oozed confidence, even though she admitted to me more than once that she was terrified, at certain times, and you never saw that, and she never indicated. She made you feel like what you were doing was the right thing, and it wasn't because of like any effusive praise or anything. It was because of the fact that she was just real calm, and whatever she inspired. With her soulfulness and her fantastic singing and presence, and it lifted everybody that was around her. Of course, I'm sure, just like it would be. I never played with Aretha, but I know that's the way it would be with her too.
I'm looking at it from the point of view of like from like my generation, kids, guys that are playing in bands. They're recording. It's all very serious. It has to be taken seriously. If something like the sheet music fell off the piano, do they have do they have the, like you said? There's I forget the word you used, but it was just a calmness and a passion that put everybody at ease. Whereas now people would say, cut, do it again, do it again. Where Aretha's like, no, you know what? Let's turn it up a notch. And it turned out that was the take that they took. To me, that's like, it's spontaneity, it's improvisation, and it's probably because you guys grew up with less micromanaging. It was more like, you're doing good now, you're not so good. Stay humble, humility and humor. But It seems to me today the micromanaging and the nitpicking, you can't see the forest through the trees, and that's a big problem. I think. I mean, if you can't see the bigger picture, somehow these cats like Etta and Aretha, they just they seemed to they just saw the bigger picture. They saw what was more important, which was the love and what you could give to audiences in a live context.
Yeah, and talking, it's not unusual in studio situations if you're playing with with experienced good people on a tune like Rock Steady. If the music falls off the piano, that ain't gonna stop shit. So what? That's a fart in a bottled tornado or
Right.
something, or a
Right.
bottled fart in a tornado. It doesn't. They probably ran the tune down a few times, and that was the chart was probably just a map of, you know, verse, chorus, bridge, outro, or something, and so they knew what the hell was going. It's the pocket, the groove, the feel, and something. We're in the middle of something here, and if something's happening, then we're not going to stop just because of something like that. That's one of the things that professional musicians learn that record at all, like Bernard, all the records he played on. When you're doing a take, if something goes wrong, some little thing, or if you make a mistake, or you don't stop. You keep playing
Mm-hmm.
because that you don't know what's going to happen. This is now, this is that, and this is what we're doing right now. And right now is what we're recording, and what we're recording right now might be the one.
When you
And so you just keep playing, because all that's valuable, unless the leg falls off the piano or something, and there's a tremendous crash, then that might stop the take. But anything beyond, other than that, or somebody breaks a drum, or I've seen guys just keep playing with broken strings and stuff in the middle of a take because everybody knew it was a good take and they weren't going to stop.
when you when you go on tour with Bonnie, for instance, depending on where you are, like the other day, BB King played a performance where he did a song. I forget the name of it, but he did it like 15 minutes long. It was meandering. It was improvisational. It was crazed hipster esque. And yet, I was reading these reviews that BB King's washed up. He's over the hill. He can't do it. He's lost in space. I'm like, no, he's just not He's not doing some choreographed play that the audience. You're not trying to placate. You're not trying to pacify. Do you guys? Does Bonnie? Do you open it up sometimes where you might, because you want to make sure that people are connecting and they hear the music that they love, the hits and stuff like that. But
Right, she has to play a certain amount of stuff that they expect, but not everything. I mean, you have to make yourself happy, or you're not going to make anybody happy. It's what you're looking for, and Bonnie's really excellent at that. Bonnie is like one of these people that gives a tremendous amount of thought to a show, and a tremendous amount of thought to the structure of a show, like where there's a start, a middle, and an end, where there's an arc in the performance. And she, on one hand, she's very meticulous about that, but on the other hand, within the show and within certain pieces of music in the show, there's a lot of room. You know what I mean?
exactly, and
She leaves room. I mean, she's extremely generous with the band too, because people get a chance to stretch out and play. It's never the same trick twice. It looks like the same trick if you wrote down, here's what we're going to do, but within that context of whatever that is, it's going to be different every night because it's constructed, in order to enable that to happen.
you have. It seems like there's a shining light over you. Just a really positive beam of light, which is one reason I just love to rap with you. And I just are you what is left for you? Like, does your son, for instance, like we talk about this, the lack of live venues, so you can really develop your own individual sound. And I realize that he's doing a lot of cool things. I mean, just doing the sponsors for the Giants and all this other stuff. But do you feel like because of the limited access for him to really get out and play in those upholstered sewers and just sort of let it loose, that it's holding him back a little bit from really getting his own, really developing that sound and that confidence and letting it flow through you?
No, not really, because he's actually having a chance to do a lot of work. He's been so lucky, and I mean, he's been lucky enough to be doing a lot of live work, especially in the last 3 years, and experiencing a lot from, just the upholstered sewers. He's played a lot of those. He was, with an agency that was a blues agent, and even though his band is more funk and soul and maybe not the same crowd, but similar, and so he's able to do that. He's played doing a lot of festivals, and then this experience he had with this artist, this French artist, Ben L'Oncle Soul. Like they went to Europe on their own a couple times, and then they've been there 3 different times with this guy. So that's a fantastic experience in playing in music halls and stuff around in Europe, and in clubs in Europe, and still playing around in the Bay Area and playing all over the country too. I mean, they've played all over the country, and they're going to be down here on May 1st in Los Angeles playing. My wife and I are going to go to that naturally.
Of course.
And so it's happening. He's just had to work a lot harder to make that happen with his band. It just requires just the same kind of dedication it takes for any musician, I guess. But it's just a little more difficult to be able to continue working in this climate, because there's not as, there's either like playing for free or paying to play, even in some places, or playing or having arrived and playing at a huge festival as a star with a big record. In between nowhere and somewhere is hard to find, but it's out there. It's just not as prevalent.
I know you spend a lot of time thinking about this. So, I mean, yeah, I think your son is about doing it the best way that it can possibly be done, the way this country is set up, as opposed to when would go to Tulsa and there'd be five blues clubs to play at, and you could be there for a month. I mean, and that it just factors into this idea that as well, like, we are just not. I mean, Mike, I got to be honest. That article scared the shit out of me in New York Times when I read that. The idea that the middle class, we are no longer, and it's not changing. It's only going to go down more. And I say to myself,
Yeah, that's because of the refusal for people in leadership positions. I think they're powerless. The American government's pretty much been co-opted by our overlords. The oligarchy. The Gilded Age has returned. I'm sure that goes hand in hand with that.
mm-hmm.
There's been quite a bit of writing about that over the past 5 years or so. It's like, what's the difference between 1890 and 2014? Well, practically speaking, not much.
Maybe the iPhone, maybe. That's about it. It's true. It's become, and it's unfortunate, because I just think as we get through younger generations, it's harder and harder for them to understand our history. I think you were so prophetic before, talking about why is it dangerous to forget history?
Well, it's who is it? Was it trying to think, Santayana, or what was that guy's name that said roughly something like, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay, I know. I don't know I forget who said that.
I can't remember the guy's name. I should. He was a novelist, but it's for obvious reasons. And also, the only reason people, like I said, what I said was it's a betrayal of national memory, and the reason it's a betrayal is because, a lie is a betrayal. And if we don't know where we came from and what we did and what worked and what didn't, then we just keep doing it. And, it's, for instance, over the past 30 years, we've seen the last 40 years, really, there's been this repeating of demonstrably failed policy initiatives. If we, in other words, if we lower taxes for the very rich and raise them on the middle class, that will make everything better. And that's proved to be false and self-serving for the obvious people. But, this is the same message we've been getting. If we just deunionize, it'll be a right-to-work state or some, and then what happens? Well, that means that, over a period of time we see that means that the people that live there make less money.
Well, we live in one, and what that means
so
is...
on and so forth. Those kinds of things. Those are the little lies that make all the big lies possible.
Yeah, in a right-to-work state, it means you have no bargaining power and they can pay you whatever they want. But somehow people think that that's a good thing. I mean, that's also it's the...
Well, that's the cynical description of the law. Right to work, that's not what it means.
Exactly. It's so... And that's the difference.
You're not going to let you form a union.
The bright light that is shining over Finnigan, that is what the Jake Feinberg show is about, is pushing back against that cynicism. Exactly. Right to work. And then the way they're using that term, they're perverting it. Anyway, let's get back to the music here. There's a track that Mike sent me personally, and we'll come back and talk about it. That's straight out of the church, the call and response there.
Yeah.
Can't get next to...
I think that was that thing I sent you of with Stephen Stells live somewhere in the 90s.
2001, Can't Get Next to You, Babe. When did you first link up with Stephen and the rest of that gang? Was Wexler the bridge for that?
No, actually, it's I met Stephen at the Milwaukee Summerfest. I was playing with Maria Muldaur, and Amos Garrett is a fantastic guitar player.
I've interviewed him.
He played. I don't know if you're too young maybe but there's a record called Midnight at the Oasis.
I have it, yeah.
That was a hit for Maria, and there's a guitar solo on that was played by Amos Garrett. He was an extremely unique stylist, and he and Stephen were friends, and he introduced me to Stephen, and that's where I met him. And I didn't see Stephen again for about 6 months, and then he called me one night at about 10 o'clock at night and said, I'm getting ready to go in the studio, and I thought maybe you might be interested in coming and doing a session. And I said, yeah, when is it? And he said, in about an hour. And that's when that was in about 1977 or so, or 8, and that's when I met Stephen, and I started doing some stuff with him. He was doing a lot of solo work along with the CSN, and then through working with him, I, spread out and began working with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and played with them for 27 years off and on, mostly on. I mean, everything they recorded or played live I did with them in that period. Did a lot of other stuff, too, because they weren't always recording or working. But so we've been friends for a long time. He's my daughter's godfather, and my wife, I couldn't do it. I had a job, but my wife was just at a benefit that Stephen did for to raise autism awareness.
Right, I saw that, and yeah, to me, it's like my daughter's favorite album is that Crosby, Stills and Nash album from '82, and now I'm blanking on it. But of course, it has Wasted on the Way, Southern Cross, and all these. You're playing all this. You're a little actually. I'm a little bummed out. Your organ's a little low in the mix on that.
There's 3 guitar players there, man.
I want your organ up in that, but no. But how much? Talk about the experience of joining up with them playing live. Talk about just how those guys carry themselves and why it's so enjoyable to play with them. How you've been able to have almost a 30-year relationship with them.
Well, they were, I consider some of their. I come from a rhythm and blues background, so I didn't naturally gravitate toward what they were doing. Although Stephen's got a lot of blues in him too, and he played with Hendrix too, and he's a brilliant guy. I mean, there was a period of time in his life when he was just like on fire. He wrote so many great songs in a short period of time, and wrote most of their. They all contributed great songs to their library of tunes, but Stephen wrote probably the most of them. But they're all different. It's one of those deals that, like the marriage of convenience thing, where there's certainly been plenty of fireworks in the relationship, but they know that there's something that happens when they work together, so they've always continued to do it. They couldn't be more different. Graham Nash is a perfect gentleman, one of the kindest, most generous, most thoughtful people I've ever met, and a real great photographer and an artist and a songwriter and a totally unique voice as a singer. Nobody sounds like him. He's got a voice you can spot a mile away. And David Crosby's a great singer and a good songwriter, and he's got a whole different approach to things. He comes out of more of a folk background, but the 3 of them, when they were in their prime, the 3 of them singing together was a sound like no other. And what I
want to know, you're being
you're
too modest.
I did most of the third part singing on that album because David was, rapidly approaching Earth from high up somewhere.
No, I know exactly what you're talking.
He was about to crash and burn and go to jail.
When I saw pictures of him going into the courtroom in '85, I said, "My God, what happened to him physically?" To me, it's amazing he even survived. Thank God he did. But no,
yeah, talk about house money.
Talk about how. Listen to you. I know. But the final. Here's my thing. What did they were like? Yeah, Finnigan's got. They're like, let's bring Mike in. How did that? Why did they love bringing you in there? Just because your voice was. I'm not a musician, Mike, so don't make me look bad here. Why did they bring you in?
No. Well, I can sing, so I mean, I was there, and like in the live shows, I could cover anybody's parts because I knew what they were, and there
Mm-hmm.
were nights when guys couldn't hit it. I mean, there were times when this guy's sick or that guy, and also for the live effect. I mean, a lot of their records are them doubled.
Yes.
In other words, there's two Nashes, two Crosbys, and two Stillses on the record singing. So, that was part. They were like one of the groups that really made that sound. And it was unless you're really an experienced listener and know something about recording, a lot of that you wouldn't really hear as, hey, that's doubled. But because it was so exact and so perfect that it didn't sound doubled. It just sounded big.
It sounded, and that's what exactly. Even my 8-year-old daughter, she loves it because it sounds big. Mike Finnigan.
And so, when we'd play live, I would double certain voices, and so it was a natural thing. Like David was supposed to sing on the album, and he did sing on several tracks, but we were doing the vocals over in Hawaii. We'd done most of the tracks in L.A., and David was supposed to be there, and he just, he was toe up from the flow up. So my wife was with me, and she still remembers that every day driving to the airport from where we were staying, in Hawaii, and David not being on the plane again. So I was singing the third part in a lot of these tunes just because David didn't show up.
Hey, Mike. I got to tell you. Again, we just did not. Are you? Can I give you? Can I reach out to you a little bit later today? Because I really want to. We have to do another part.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll be in maybe this weekend. Are you gonna? When are you going to go back? Are you going to be in town for a while or?
Yes, I'm going to be in town from until. Let's see. I'm not going anywhere until May the 7th.
All right, let me drop you a line later, and we can do part 3 because today just felt. I know there was some jewels, but there's just too much to do, and I want to continue to chronicle it while you're still playing with house money.
Okay, man, that'd be fine, Jake. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Good to talk to you, you crazed hipster. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
All right, man. Take care.
Later. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.